Uh, it was roundabout. I grew up in Mississippi, and Jimmy was also born in Mississippi. So he was, for those of us who played music in Mississippi, he was sort of a role model because he was a storyteller that grew up and didn't seem particularly serious about anything, and he had done really well. And Mississippians aren't traditionally serious. We're I don't want to say lazy, but it's a slow moving life that we have, and most of us that played guitar were not very hopeful of playing guitar anywhere off the porch of our house. That's where we entertained ourselves because there wasn't much else to do. I like to say that spare time is the major export of Mississippi. And Jimmy had done well, and so I became a fan of his that way. And he was a fine writer, and like myself, seemed to study the Southern literature, Faulkner and Tennessee Williams. Those writers also came from Mississippi, the prose writers, and his songs had a little bit of literary aspect to the words. And I wanted to be a prose writer when I was a kid, and I wasn't particularly good. And then I discovered how good Faulkner was, and I said, well, maybe I should do something else. And I started playing guitar. And when I was maybe 18, I got a little record deal to put some of my short story songs on a record. And Jimmy, someone played Jimmy a copy of my record, and he wrote me a note. And he said that we're both Mississippians, we're both storytellers, we're going to be friends, we're going to write songs together, I'm going to record some of your songs. And he was a hero of mine, so that was a wonderful thing. And I'm not certain in Europe if it's the same as United States, but usually in the entertainment business, when someone tells you something, it's not 100% sincere. And in the case of Jimmy Buffett, that was 100% sincere. All of those things have happened, and he's been a great inspiration and a great supporter of everything that I've done along the way, all these years from that was 1977 until now. And I've never been a particularly great supporter of myself, so to have him in my corner has been a wonderful thing for me. I think I won the lottery. No, actually, I'm a fan of Little Feat also from childhood. I used to sit and listen and analyze their records, and to the degree that you can analyze, I just had a little turntable in Mississippi, and I would listen to the left speaker all day, and then I would listen to the right speaker all day, and see if I could figure out what they were doing. They were an amazing band, and they were heroes of mine as well. And also the connection through Jimmy, because he's a great fan of Little Feat. And so we had the opportunity to play some with Billy Payne, and they were discussing making a record together. And sort of like we had done with Jimmy's record License to Chill, which Mike Utley and myself produced, they wanted to do maybe a Little Feat record with some guest artists doing their favorite Little Feat song, or find a new song and do together, or loosely defined Little Feat and Friends. And I was selected by some freak process to be able to co-produce with Billy Payne that record, and it was just a wonderful experience for me to get, more than anything, to get to play with that band, just to get to sit in a room and play with Billy Payne and Richie Hayward and Fred Tackett and Paul Brer, and they're just such wonderful players. That's really the language. As you can see, I struggle with the spoken word sometimes, but the language of playing is just a wonderful thing to sit in those guys' presence and get to play, and one that I'll always cherish. Well, one of the influences Mr. Buffett has been on me is he tends to do things and then sort it out later. and if you began to hypothetically discuss making a record with a bunch of stars, you run into management and lawyers and labels and people who generally discourage the notion. Whereas if you just talk about making music with great players, they want to do it. So we got together down in Key West, and we cut some tracks, and we talked to some people. Just the artists. Jimmy talked to a couple artists, and the Little Feat guy said, "Hey, we're going to do this," and everybody we spoke to was like, "Okay, fine, yeah, that sounds great." And so we made the music, and then that was the simple part, and then getting the clearances and the labels to come back behind us and make sure that it's okay was the difficult part. The music we recorded very quickly, and then 3.5 years later the record comes out because of the cleaning up behind. But we had a great time making the record, and I like to think that having a great time records just as loud as flat and sharp and ahead of the beat and behind the beat. I like the sound of people enjoying themselves, and I can hear that enjoying the band, and that's the thing I'm probably proudest of. And there's always an exchange when people play. You know, some of the singers that were singing guest versions of the songs, their mind is ingrained, as is mine sometimes, with the original recording. And Little Feat, over the course of 30 years, they play. They're a living, breathing band. They change, the arrangements change. They do an entirely different version of Dixie Chicken. You know, every couple of months it morphs into something else. And so in some cases for them it was going back and probably revisiting something that they hadn't done in 20 years, even though it's their song. You know, like, oh, I sing, you know, the Vince Gill version of Dixie Chicken is fairly traditional, more like the original than what they had been playing. But that was a nice thing. They were like, oh yeah, that's Dixie Chicken, you know. And in some cases we took it somewhere. In the case of Emmylou Harris and Sailing Shoes, it was like, we want to do sort of a half blues and then morph into bluegrass, the blue to bluegrass twist with Sailing Shoes, and having Bela Fleck and Sam Bush and those guys with us made that possible. And Emmylou, of course, brings a lot to the table in that regard. So that was a totally fresh. That was something that had never been done. Dave Matthews, Fat Man in the Bathtub. Same kind of thing. We discussed what to do, and what it turned into was better than what we imagined. So that's nice when your imagination doesn't equal the results.